Hello. Welcome to Game Changer Live, brought to you by connorscoaching.com. We created this show and our growing community to share on topics of positivity, coaching, personal development, mindset, and more. We go live because we believe it brings you the most authentic and unedited version of ourselves to you, and that means that you're probably going to see me make a couple mistakes as I talk, because this is live and it's largely unscripted. I mean, I have a few speaking notes, but it's just me. Like, what you see is what you get. We start every Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, unless there's technical issues, and we have occasional guest spots, usually on the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. And together, we inspire. My name is Daniel Connor, and I'm the owner of Connor's Coaching, and I'm a certified professional coach, and I'm a proud member of the International Coaching Federation, which means that I hold myself to a gold standard of ethics in coaching for my clients. Stuck people hire me when they're ready to discover a more fulfilling and purposeful life. Our vision is simple, that every day we get to wake up to a better version of ourselves reflected in the mirror. And today we're talking about lies that we tell ourselves. Forgive me while I get a little bit traumatic here. If only I knew now what I knew. Sorry. Let me try that again. Whew. Scene. Okay, let's action take two. Okay, here we go. If only I knew what I knew now. They treat me like that because they hate me. No one really understands me. I'm worthless. I shouldn't even bother. I wish I had gotten that line right earlier. If only I was. We lie to ourselves daily. And I have a really good example of this. I was talking to my husband, Chris, yesterday about this episode and what I wanted to talk about, and how this was a theme that had come up in my coaching this week and in listening to other coaches talking, and the stories that we tell ourselves to hide from ourselves. That our perceptions of reality are so flawed, and that we buy into these false perceptions. And he told me this story of how he identified with that, and I wanted, and he gave me permission. I want to tell you that story because it is fascinating, and it shows that these lies do show up. And for all intents and purposes, there, some of them are there as survival mechanisms, some of them are there to benefit us, but we could all benefit from questioning them every now and again. So this is a story about my husband, Chris. So he yesterday, he works for a large corporation. They had a Valentine's Day baking competition, and he wanted to enter. It's a great way to challenge himself to be more involved in the community and to get his name out there and to network with people. So he's really kind of gung ho on that. And it was so cute on Sunday watching him work really hard to make like four batches. He made four batches of these pecan bars. And and he was meticulous about it. He had a whole process. He had all the ingredients lined up. He researched the recipe, even tried different things for his specific version of the recipe so that it was different than just the version that he got off the cookbook or from watching me cook them. Because this is a recipe that we had been using a lot. In fact, I had just made them for my family a couple weeks ago. And when he got to the competition, he brought in his pecan bars, feeling fairly proud of himself for the amount of work that he did, set them on the table, and he looked around and saw one of the contestants had a little bakery box with bakery level decorated cupcakes that had like little flower patterns on them, and was in this white box that had a see-through thing on the top. He made a photo of it, and he was like, he sent me a text, and he was like, I can't believe I'm up against this, or something to that effect. And Another contestant had a flan that was to die for, and flan is a very difficult dessert to pull off, to be honest. Or at least it feels that way to those of us who are uninitiated. Meanwhile, Chris had these homemade pecan bars. Our family loves them, but the pieces weren't 100% even. They were in a disposable plastic container. They were a bit crumbly here and there. And at this point, he told lie number one. And lie number one was that he convinced himself that there was no point in winning, that he was just there to make a name for himself and show up, and he was happy to just be there. That's lie number one. From his perspective, he'd already lost. And he wasn't even a judge. Now, lie number two came while Chris was actually cooking. So this may actually be lie number one, but Chris shared with me that he thought maybe I should have added a little salt, or the flavor's not quite right, or I wish I could have done better. There's so many times, and this came up a lot in my coaching, that the word I should have comes up when we're relaying something that happened to us in the past. And the answer is no. Stop using the past as a tool to beat yourself up. Should have is a lie. You did the very best you could based on the information, the energy, the resources, and the ingredients that you had on hand. Now, uh, you know, Chris told this lie, and I want to explain that he did the very best he could with this recipe at the time that he did it, based on his experience and his intention. He worked with everything that he had. He didn't half-ass it, and he refused to even let me help him measure the ingredients because he wanted to make sure that he could stand in front of the judges and say that these are the bars that he made. I am so proud of him. So why did he beat himself up with this lie that he should have done something different? Now, and I have theories as to why, and we can talk about that here in a second. But I want to finish the story. But I'm going to tell you lie number three because Chris won first place at this bakery competition against these masterfully created, artisan cupcakes and this flan. He won. And he had to convince himself at that point with another lie that the only reason he won was that the judges took pity on him, that they felt bad for him, and that's why he won. It couldn't have possibly been that he made the best food. It couldn't have been that they were impressed with the food that he made. Nah. Am I surprised he won? No. Our pecan bars are epic. They are really good. My whole family was beaming about how good these pecan bars were for weeks after I made them for a family event. And he took a lot of risks with this recipe. He browned the butter, which isn't something I did. And it brought out a lot of extra flavor, a deeper and richer, more mellow flavor, actually. And this isn't a cooking channel, but I can't tell you how good these pecan bars are. They are unbelievably good. Anyway, um, he picked the best pieces of the ones that he cut, the ones that were the most exact, the most precisely cut, the most similarly shaped. He put them out for the judges and for the other contestants, and the ones that were slightly irregular, we had fun eating those on Sunday. No pecan bar went to waste. I think he did remarkable. So here in this simple event, Chris told himself three different lies. That his pecan bars were just not good enough, that he could have done better, and when he won, it was just out of pity. Why? Well, I couldn't keep myself contained when he told me that story, and I asked him a very coachy question, which I told him, I was like, here's my very coachy question for you. What are you gaining by believing that you won out of pity? What's the harm in believing that you won because you deserved it? I thought about that question a lot, and I realized later when I was going back through the story that there was more than just that one really obvious lie, that the other two were there as well. And I started realizing that there are two different lies at play here. The lies going into the judging, the lies about maybe mine aren't good enough, maybe I should have done better, those lies were designed to lower his expectations so that if he lost, it wouldn't hurt. It's a baking competition, an amateur baking competition. There's no Paul Hollywood handshake at the end of this. I think there may have been an Amazon gift card or something like that, but the stakes were really low. But for some reason, our ego doesn't know how to separate when the stakes are low versus when the stakes are high. And it needs to beat us up before we go in, just in case we lose. But the lie that was told afterwards, that the only reason he won because of pity, maybe he needed to hide. Maybe he needed to not be seen. Maybe the attention was overwhelming. I don't know. That's for Chris to decide. But I can tell you that it is a perfect story to tell you about this topic, because I can tell you that this came up for my clients so many times this week. At least twice for one of my clients. I said, stop beating yourself up. Stop using should have statements to beat yourself up for things that were outside of your control. Now, we all lie to ourselves for various different reasons. We lie to make ourselves less important than we are or more important than we are. We lie to make ourselves feel better when things don't go our way, or to feel worse so that we don't expect things to go our way. We lie to explain the way people treat us, to tell stories about why things happen as if we were the center of the universe, and that the entire universe and the way all people react to is related to us and our infinite humility. Sometimes those lies help us move past the event. They help level us out. Maybe, like I said, Chris was feeling overwhelmed by the attention and needed those lies to help hide him from his own ego. Sometimes the monster we're hiding from is really ourselves. Sometimes those lies serve us. Sure. Being reasonable in the face of potential failure, if the lie is helping you do that, then maybe it is serving you. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't serve us. Sometimes they are the output of a bruised or a scarred psyche that needs our love and attention. And sometimes it's just our mind playing tricks on us to motivate or demotivate us to keep us safe from perceived harm or threat. What's the worst that could happen? Embarrassment? Maybe fear isn't the right tactic. So, when we're looking at this, I don't have a one size fits all solution for overcoming these lies. But I do have a few keywords that you can listen to when that inner critic starts talking to you. Here are a few keywords in English that are frequently referenced when we're using lies to beat ourselves up. Or another way of looking at this is flawed perspective. They just, if only I should have. Boy, that one comes up a lot. I should have, I should have, I should have. Ah, shoulda, coulda, woulda. I wish I. And who am I to? Now, another tactic, other than just listening for those keywords in your inner voice, that I can help with here is to listen for perspective of other people in your own storytelling. If you are telling your story and it involves how someone else is feeling, unless they explicitly told you that that's how they're feeling, that's a lie. Even if you think it makes perfectly logical sense that their face was scrunched up and they were short and they had a bad temper, maybe they had diarrhea and they needed to use the restroom. Maybe they just got stung by a bee. You don't actually know what is causing those reactions to come up for those people. But it is very easy for us to tell stories that are logical, and that logical story that you're telling becomes your truth or your reality. But it is a bald faced lie. Even if it's true, it's still a lie until it's spoken out loud. And the reality is, we are not the center of the universe for other people. Other people get grumpy without us even helping. I'm perfectly capable of being angry at myself or a situation without anyone helping or being the focus of that anger. But I am also really bad at hiding my emotions. So when I'm angry, it's pretty obvious that I am. And that means that a lot of people probably tell a lot of stories or lies about why I'm angry. Now, the trick here is all about consciousness. And the reason for that is, and when I say consciousness, I'm not just talking about getting up and being awake from a night of sleep. I am talking about awareness and presence in the moment, being on the spot and aware of the thoughts that are going on in your head. The reason for that is that in a conscious state, those lies, it's very difficult for them to exist because the systems that tell those lies are more tied to our subconscious brain. There are two areas of your brain that tell these stories. The first one is in the front. It's the prefrontal cortex. It's right here, right between your eyes and just slightly above them, kind of where your third eye would be. And it's also the part of you that feels empathy towards other people. And that's the one that tends to tell positive stories about others. And it's more involved in creating social binds between other people and creating logical patterns out of other people's behavior. So those lies tend to be a little bit more benign, but they're still lies. And the other one is the brainstem, right at the base of the spinal cord, right where the brain hits the spinal cord, the hypothalamus area. That is the other part of your brain that tells stories, and the reason that that part of your brain tells stories is to keep you safe. It perceives threats. It perceives threats that are going to cause you anxiety or embarrassment, and it does whatever it can do to convince you to flee from the situation, to fear it, to flee it, to run from it, or maybe to fight it aggressively. But neither of these parts of our brain is capable of actually telling us the objective truth because no part of our brain is capable of objective thought. Our brains are perceptive. That means that they're limited to what they are aware of. And we do not have the ability to read minds. We are not Vulcans or Betazoids or whatever from whatever science fiction universe. We cannot read minds. Some of the lies that we tell are more deeply ingrained and more related to past trauma or past events. And when they are preventing us from living the life that we want, coaches often refer to these as blocks. There are four, give or take, four general categories that blocks of this type can show up as lies. And they, if it helps you to know those categories, they're limiting beliefs, interpretations, assumptions, and at their most monstrous, they are gremlins. And these are usually rooted in either trauma or survival mechanisms from our childhood that pop up to keep us safe, even if it's making us miserable. So, just really quickly, I want to talk about these because these are the lies that really deserve being challenged and being looked at. The lies that, the only reason I won was out of pity. It's a shame that we live that way, and you certainly can choose not to live that way by being conscious and listening to the words that you're using to beat yourself up with. But these are the lies specifically that really need to be challenged because they are limiting your potential and limiting your forward momentum in life in general. So the first of these lies is the limiting belief. This is the lowest level of lie. And this is something that you believe that limits you in some way. It's in the name. And usually it's because someone told you something. Maybe it's because your favorite parent said, I wouldn't waste my time on that. And so in your mind, whatever that was becomes a waste of time. We buy into limiting beliefs because someone else believed them, but they limit us from reaching our full potential. They are things like, I, I, I must be dumb because I'm blonde. That's a limiting belief that a lot of people identify with. Um, that's an example. And I don't really want to get too deep in the weeds for examples. I was worried that this episode was going to be too short, so I'm really glad that I get to cut some time here, actually. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about interpretations because limiting beliefs, I think that those are pretty obvious once you hit that moment where why do I believe, that I shouldn't be on LinkedIn or that it bothers me that what people think. Interpretations are when you tell stories for other people, and we talked about that a lot today already. That's when someone does something and you interpret the reason that they did that, and that interpretation becomes the lie that you live with. Now, interpretations are dangerous because they lead us to acting on those presumptions or acting on those assumptions, right? Now, imagine Chris getting this award and believing that he only got it out of pity, and now imagine that he's a type A type person who that would be very insulting. Maybe he would have confronted the judges at the awards ceremony and said something regrettable, something based off entirely his perception. So you can see how interpretations can be blocks towards behaving in a way that's consistent with who we want to be. Assumptions is the next level of these blocks, of these types of lies that are blocking us from moving forward. And it's difficult language here because assumption sounds a lot like interpretation, and they sound a lot like the same thing, but they're really not. When we use the word assumption, what we're really talking about is pattern thinking. Because it happened before, it's doomed to happen again. Because I failed in my interview last week, I'm never going to do well in an interview again. Because I got turned down for my car loan 5 years ago, I'm never going to be able to qualify for a new car loan. That might be another example. These are assumptions based off of our pattern thinking, our ability to create connections where there really aren't any connections. And these can be very subtle and very difficult to pick out. The way to challenge these is to ask, is it just you? Are you doomed? Because if you're the only one that's doomed, based on this story that you're telling yourself, and it's a lie, it's not true. And what you can do about that then is to challenge yourself to come up with a different story that suits you better. That I didn't get the interview because I wasn't the most qualified candidate that week, but they loved me anyway. And I should just try again. My time will come. Now, the last of these is truly difficult to weed out. It requires training, and it's honestly, I have a different perspective on it now, I think, than I did when I first learned about it. But it's the gremlin, the monster in the closet. And these are deep personal fears based on a message of, I'm not enough. Um, and they usually come about due to some form of childhood event. Uh, we could call it trauma, but absolutely everyone on Earth experiences something like this. So, for example, maybe this actually happened to me. This may have been the source of one or two of my gremlins. When I was 7 years old, I had just gotten a bicycle and we went camping, and I wanted to go for one last ride around the campsite while my mom picked up the camp, and she was very glad to get me out of her hair. So I went on a ride, and I crashed my bike and broke my chain about halfway through my ride, and I had to limp back to the camp, and she was gone out looking for me at that point, but I didn't know. I thought that she had abandoned me. I thought that she had driven back home. She was like, well, Daniel's gone now. I'm never going to see him again. um, and the story that we create from those times is something along the lines of, I'm not lovable. I'm not smart enough. I'm not credible. I'm not believable. I'm not enough. Whatever enough is. And the reason that this gremlin shows up for you is to keep you safe. The reason that the gremlin is there is to prevent you from experiencing that trauma again. So by believing that I'm not um, desirable in my mother's life, it made it safe to be abandoned by anyone going forward from that point forward, because I just had a reason for it. And you can see how these are interpretations that have evolved over time into gremlins. Generally speaking, these tend to blur, the lines tend to blur between these different types of lies that we tell ourselves. But the general truth is that if there's a lie that you're telling yourself that is blocking you from forward momentum in your life, if it's that I can't get a job because I can't interview well, if it's that I um I always lose whenever I try to do something, if it's um someone told me that fat people are gross to look at on YouTube, that maybe those limiting beliefs aren't serving you. Maybe those assumptions or interpretations or gremlins aren't serving you. And it might be time to address them. And that's what coaches do. That's what a lot of coaches do. Now, we do not deal with trauma. If trauma comes up as a result of looking at some of these types of events, as an ICF certified coach, I cannot address trauma. I can refer you to someone who can, a mental health professional or someone of that nature. And these blocks may just also be the piles and piles of bullcrap that happen as a result of being a normal, average human being, because we drag along that bullcrap with us all day long. We have tons, a metric ton of lie that we are pulling behind us as we walk through this life. And my question to you is, what could you accomplish if you let those lies go and you let yourself be unburdened going forward? If you want help parsing through all of that information so that you can decide what you want to believe is true and what you want to think as you progress through life, consider hiring a coach. Coaches like me are experts at helping people get to the place that the people want to see in themselves. And there's no agenda, there's no BS, and I will not let you lie to yourself. You can always check me out on my website at connerscoaching.com. That's CONNERS coaching.com. There's a link in the description of this video. And thank you so much for watching today. Just take a moment of your day to give back to this community with 3 simple actions. Take a moment to log into YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like this video specifically, and if you want to go further, leave us a message in the comment section to brighten our day and tell us what inspired you. And I will see you next week, Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And remember our motto today, together we inspire. I'll see you then. Bye.